with us. Oh,
Aw.
hi, Sarah. Sarah has sat retreats with me at Southern Dharma, and you have a baby now. That's right. The last time you were there, you were carrying the baby in your belly. Oh, that's so sweet. Wow, wow, wow. All right. Well, we all have an object for our metta meditation today then. Beautiful. Oh. Um, and now we have to try to close our eyes and not look at the baby. Maybe that's easier for some people. So we're going to start with some meditation for about 20 minutes. And, do you can, sit in whatever way is really most conducive for you, for your practice. So if you have a meditation cushion and you like to cross your legs, that's wonderful. And you're very fortunate that you can cross your legs. Some of us used to be able to cross our legs. And so you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And turning inward to the feeling of just being in a body. And just letting the breath soften the body. A sense of calming and settling. Feeling the energies in the body, the sensations, and having a sense of releasing any tension. And each of us is in our own physical space, so just awareness of your own physical space. What are the sounds that you're hearing? What's your seating situation feel like? Is it warm, warm or cool? And again, feeling the body breathing. Oh, the opening minutes of a meditation period. Take a bit of patience and kind of acceptance, not expecting to suddenly be in a trance or some deep meditation, just really starting almost in a casual way in the sense of you're just checking yourself out, checking out your experience, kind of letting things settle in a natural way, not forcing that, and letting the attention start to coalesce around the breath. So again, not forcing that. So you're not trying to block out anything. So it can be helpful to start with just a general feeling of the breath, how the body moves, the whole, the whole involvement of the breath in the body. And then gradually starting to aim the attention more specifically at the sensations either at the nostrils or at the belly, so that you're narrowing that focus, making it more precise, either feeling the air at the nostrils coming in and out, or resting with the movement of the abdomen rising and falling. But even as we become more focused on a particular area of sensation of the breath, we're not so much blocking out the rest of our experience as we are kind of bringing the breath forward or letting it be in focus. Well, there's still a background of body and feelings, thoughts, and with the breath in the foreground. So in this way, it's not an efforting or struggle, but something that feels relatively organic. Just the body breathing, very simple, relaxing. And even as we try to make our practice simple, being with the breath, the body, the habit of thinking, the stream of thoughts often will take us away, get lost. Sometimes for relatively long periods of time, sometimes just for a moment. We can't exactly control this once we're in a thought. But when you become aware that you're thinking, and that's the critical moment to let go and come back to the breath. There can also be moments when you're aware of the breath and a thought appears. It's almost like a choice. You really feel yourself drawn into the story that the thought is pointing to. Oh, this is challenging to let go of whatever that story is, some plan or memory or some hope, maybe some creative enterprise or even a dharma topic you want to think about. Oh, none of us are perfect meditators. Inevitably, we'll at times follow that story, follow that thought stream. But at some point, we'll come out of it. And really, in that moment of waking up, there's often a kind of residue of the thought that shows us the unsatisfactory nature of thought. Because thoughts don't solve things exactly. They can be helpful, they can be pointing to something, but most of the time there's a grasping in the thought. It's either a kind of wanting for something to happen or to create something, or an aversive kind of wanting to get rid of something. And behind that can be the underlying need to have a sense of a self, to reassure ourselves, our identity, our importance, who we are, of clinging to self. So just to touch that, whatever feeling is triggered by a thought, notice that as you return to the breath and breathe then with the feeling for a moment to let it dissipate, to let it fade. Then just again return to the simplicity of breathing in, breathing out. All right. Good morning again. Nice to see a nice turnout. Oh, it is Valentine's Day, isn't it? Well, maybe we'll have to do some metta practice. I don't know. Do we have to do that? Oh, thanks, Steve. Yeah. Great. All right. Well, I don't see Joni here. One of our friends who shows up here sometimes. There was a little quote from her in The Lion's Roar I got yesterday. So, all right. So, again, we're looking at a burning desire, Dharma God, and the path of recovery. And we're on step 6. And I was looking at this last night, and there are certain things I come to that are like kind of striking for various reasons. And this particular passage is one that was kind of a pivotal moment in my teaching, and I think in my efforts to kind of explain my own practice. This book was published in 2010, so 13 years ago, and before the book was published, I was giving workshops kind of on the subject, on that subject of God and the steps, sort of, and mostly at Spirit Rock. And so that I describe a moment there, which I remember really clearly, and I remember I have the visual of this. This was before Spirit Rock had a community meditation hall, when all their day-longs and classes, anything that wasn't a residential retreat, happened in a double-wide trailer that was there for a long time, for like probably almost 20 years. So I did a lot of teaching in that trailer. It used to get Monday nights with Jack Kornfield there were very crowded. All right. So I'm going to read from this because it's a lot of good stuff in here. I think it's on page 179 if you happen to be looking at the book. When I get to step 6 in my workshops, I often ask people to do an exercise in which they ask themselves what makes it easy to let go and how they could cultivate this quality. They then discuss this in small groups in a mindful speech exercise. A couple of years ago, I was taking a group through this process when a woman near the front of the class raised her hand. I realized that what made it possible for me to get sober was hitting a bottom. That's what made it easy to let go. But I don't want to cultivate hitting bottom. For a moment, I was taken aback. Good point, I said, which is what you say when you don't know how to respond. I took a breath and considered, and this is what I told her. When we practice meditation, we start to notice our suffering much more quickly. We become more sensitive to suffering and less willing to hold on to the things that cause it. So what we are doing, in a sense, is raising our bottom, making it easier to hit bottom without it being a disaster. That way we can grow and change without our lives falling apart. The Buddha said that the appropriate response to the noble truth of suffering was to understand suffering. When we experience suffering clearly, we are motivated to change, to let go. So what the Buddha might be doing by pointing us towards seeing our suffering is helping us to become more sensitive so that we'll more quickly release the suffering. When people get sober, a lot starts to clear up. after a while, someone might say, now that I'm sober, I see that this smoking thing really isn't working for me, and they'll quit cigarettes. Soon they might be aware of their unhealthy diet and begin to eat better. They'll notice that their body doesn't feel very good when they don't exercise, so they'll take up a sport or exercise regimen. They'll realize they're feeling stressed and explore meditation. So, just in the way the Buddha suggested, as we stay sober, we become more sensitive to our suffering, to what isn't working in our lives. This inspires us to change. In the words of the steps, it helps us to become entirely ready to change. This approach to spiritual growth is typical of the Buddha's teaching in its counterintuitiveness. Pay attention to suffering in order to get happy. But after all, when do we become willing to change? Surely not when everything's going well, or when we perceive things to be going well. That's why when people are in denial about their addiction, they refuse to do anything about it. When you are able to ignore your pain, you can avoid dealing with it. In meditation, our pain often becomes very clear. We can't ignore it, so our next tendency is to try to make it go away. Many of the questions that come up in a meditation class are about how to get rid of difficult experiences like pain in the knees, sleepiness, or rambling thoughts. We have the idea that meditation is supposed to be pleasant, peaceful, relaxing, and instead we've got all these problems. We want to push the problems aside and get to the good stuff. When the teacher suggests exploring these things rather than giving some antidote for them, it can be even more frustrating. Here they've been talking about all the good things that come from meditating, but we're not getting any of them. We're sure as we watch them meditate in front of the class that they are having a wonderful, blissful time. So why won't they tell us how we can get some of that bliss too? It turns out that the good stuff is inside the problems rather than on the other side of them. We let ourselves become absorbed in the pain in our knees and eventually find stillness and concentration. We let ourselves feel the fullness of our fatigue, and we move through our resistance into a new level of energy. We open to the barrage of thoughts assaulting us, and we find that we can just let them pass through the mind with no friction. This truth is even more apparent when dealing with emotional pain. Once we see our sadness, anxiety, anger, or fear, we can't help but want it to go away. But how do you make sadness go away? Isn't that how we got into trouble in the first place? Wasn't our addiction all wrapped up in trying not to feel something? If we try to think it away, we wind up feeding it with our aversion. The more you think about your problem, the worse you feel about yourself. What's wrong with me that I've got this problem? Where did it come from? Why won't it go away? Rather than trying to think your feelings away, mindfulness says to open to them. Go into the body and feel where the emotion lives. Trust that holding the feeling with kindness and patience will allow it to pass. Impermanence is your friend in this case. Once an emotion gets triggered, it has a kind of half-life that has to be respected. If we aren't mindful, we keep reacting and feeding the feeling. The less you react to the feeling, the shorter the half-life. The feeling fades, the situation changes, your day goes by, and sooner or later you find that the feeling is gone, washed away by the tides of time with every other experience in your life. And about those teachers in front of the meditation hall, it's not that they're experiencing bliss all the time, at least not this teacher, but rather that they've learned not to fight with suffering. This is the first noble truth. As long as you have a body and mind, there are going to be difficulties. How you respond to those difficulties largely determines the level of suffering in your life. To embrace step 6 in its entirety, entirety, is to recognize the persistence of dukkha. To work step 6 fully is to meet each difficulty with readiness. When we see our life as a spiritual journey, this process is ongoing. We realize that it's unlikely we'll achieve perfection. So there is always something to work on, always something to cultivate or let go of. And while this can sound like a burden, to me, it's just the opposite. It is the purpose and the joy of life to keep exploring our potential and keep learning and growing. To quote an unlikely source, the Jefferson Airplane, life is change, how it differs from the rocks. Not that we have the choice, but if we did, would we really choose the relative stasis of a mineral over the dynamism of life, even with all its problems and pain? I want to see another Dharma book that quotes the Jefferson Airplane. Come on, man. Like, it's just like. And if you're curious, that's from the song Crown of Creation. Not that, don't let me start. So, folks, I don't know. There's a lot in that, I think. So just to, what I didn't repeat, and I typically do, is step 6 is we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defective character. So, we're kind of, part of this, of course, is trying to figure out how God removes our defective character if we don't believe in God and what that would mean. And so I'm trying to describe this process. That first of all, as just a review here, that first we have to just see what's going on, and that yeah, a big part of being ready to change is seeing that what we're doing isn't working, right? And until we see that, we're not really ready to change. I actually got a text from a family member this morning about a friend of theirs who has a problem with drinking, and my family member wanted to help them, and I was like, for my first question is, are they ready? Do they want to change? Do they think they have a problem, or is it just you who thinks they have a problem? So that's always the starting point, right? And mindfulness, the irony of mindfulness is, I'm practicing mindfulness so that I can, be peaceful. But instead, of course, you're mindful, and what do you run into? All the crap that's like, unresolved, underlying issues and all of that. It's like, now what do I do? And so, that's the beginning, is to see it, and then how do we move through it? And you guys who've been with me for a while have heard me describe this process of being with feelings over and over. And I had this this happens to me regularly. It's why it's my practice. I mean, yesterday I just woke up in one of those like moods, and moods are so freaking strange. I don't understand them, and I'm not convinced by anybody's theories about them, but, just this like, and it's, for so many, literally decades of my life, I took that feeling as being a real thing, and having meaning, and that therefore it was a problem. And yesterday it was like, this just sucks and it's going to go away. I'm not going to, let it control my day. And it happened. It's interesting. So I'll say that, my approach to the difficulties like that is founded in being aware of the suffering and the impermanence of it. Those are two foundational elements. And then trying to act skillfully, do things, take care of myself. That's two of the three characteristics, right? The suffering and impermanence. The third characteristic is not self. which tends not to be my, like, the one that I focus on a whole lot. But it happened that I was talking to a friend of mine who's a Dharma teacher yesterday, someone who actually went through teacher training with me and who's very experienced and wonderful teacher and good friend. And I was talking about this struggle, and what he pointed to right away was not self and not identifying with the feeling, which is also part of what I'm doing. I just don't think of it in that way, but by just being mindful of the feeling as a feeling rather than as being me or my problem, or like, oh, I am depressed or I am sad, or it's just like, no, there's just a feeling and there's my awareness of it, that is a not self process. But what also occurs to me about that, and this is like a little twist on not self, is that not only do I not have a self, but the feeling doesn't have a self. So what I mean by that is that the feeling is just a feeling, and I give it a name and a reality of, like, you know, that it's this solid thing that exists in some in some real way, but it doesn't, it's not that thing, it's my naming it is just based on my own understanding of it. But someone else could have the same feeling and identify it in a completely different way. So anyway, there's just these, it's about changing this relation. So working with something like that is really about changing your relationship to the experience, stepping out of this, oh, I'm miserable, this is terrible, what am I going to do? And I'm not, whatever that feeling triggers in you, and whatever then behavior it triggers in you, and thought patterns that it triggers in you, and the story that just builds up and reifies it even more, right? It becomes more real the more you, like, process it in some way, rather than just breathing and there it is and it's unpleasant and I'm going to go have breakfast, like, okay, and now I'm going to take a walk. Now I'm going to sit down and work. Now I'm going to write some emails. I'm just going to do what I do. I'm going to talk to people, and I'm not going to devote my day to, I'm so miserable, what am I going to do about it? I need to call a psychiatrist and get some antidepressants. Just going to, like, there's this feeling. And it's just so remarkable because, of course, within 2 hours of that, it was completely gone. Completely gone, and it hasn't showed up yet, and it'll come back later this week maybe, or next week, whatever. These feelings are very strange, so a couple more things about them. I come to see these feelings as also as energetic, or as just energies. And again, this takes it out of, when I name it as, when I give it this meaning, even saying it's sadness, which it feels like something like sadness, that gives it a kind of almost authority or meaning that just calling it an energy or a feeling doesn't infuse into it. So again, this is about taking out the selfness of that feeling, taking out its significance, and especially its meaning. I don't believe it has any meaning. I think it has a cause. I don't know exactly what the cause is, and it doesn't exactly solve anything to me to say, oh, well, my parents did this, or I had this trauma experience, or yesterday, my sports team lost and I'm depressed, whatever, it can be anything, right? It's just stupid. Not stupid. I take that back. It's just typically the causality, understanding causality doesn't really solve the the issue. So I think there was something else that I was going to say before I open it up. About the feeling and the feelings, blah, 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 blah. Well, it'll come back. So thank you for listening. And thank you to Monica, who has put in some of the things in some of the information about things that you should know, like how to offer me Dana. That's always nice. Oh, and we're still collecting quotes. That's right. We're collecting quotes from my books that we're going to do some posting, in my, Making Kevin Famous that we're all invested in. Not really. And that there is still room on the retreat. I was just talking to Greg yesterday, but it's all pretty much dorms, I think, that are available, dorm rooms, and it's a pretty funky dorm. And also, if you're coming on that retreat, the food sucks, but that's just the way it is. So we're going to practice mindfulness of not liking food. I will mention, I'm starting the Living Kindness course next week. If you have not heard about that, it's an 8-week course. We're going to go through not so much the book, although we are going to draw from the book, my book, Living Kindness, but it's a broader look at the Brahma Viharas, the loving kindness and compassion practices, and sort of different teachings, different Buddhist teachings and some more secular teachings, and from different angles. And so there are a couple spots left in that. If you're interested, I am charging for it, unlike this class, charging $20 to $25 a class. So if you're interested in joining that, email me. I'll put my email address in here. And I have put together, I think, a pretty interesting curriculum. And if you have signed up for that, you will be hearing from me in the next few. Well, I'm going to send out the Zoom link and a little bit more of an outline of the first week's class, and some links to some suttas and stuff. I'll send that out. I'll probably wait till this weekend, since the class isn't until Tuesday. I don't want it to get lost in your email inbox. So, oh man, there's a hand up already, and I didn't even ask. Go ahead, Kate. You are welcome to speak.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for this. Incredibly timely for me, and I'm sure others. The whole idea of naming the feeling. I'm left with the idea of it being sort of this subjective relationship with my own experience, and like deciding what something is and then moving on with it. And the whole idea that once I've done that, it's going to trigger these behaviors, responses. And in a sense, in those areas that we work on, it seems as though that can really sort of disengage the process of the awareness and the mindfulness piece, and not allowing setting down, let it be, is an incredible challenge, and some of the feelings that can come up. And I do indeed love the line, it turns out that the good stuff is inside the problems rather than on the other side of them.
Yeah.
And, in our little community of recovery here, we have this little expression about the only way, it's about, we can't go around, we have to go through.
Yeah, the only way out is through. Yep.
Yeah. And we had a loss in our community, and one of our sisters lost her 44-year-old daughter to an overdose Thursday night, and she was to go back to prison on Friday. And so we're all reeling from this, and again, a long list of people who have left us.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for the idea of how important it is to just lean in to these feelings versus deciding what they are.
Yeah.
And I know that my practice has over the last year and a half has really significantly changed in terms of allowing my own allowing to let that happen has been of great benefit to me as I move through these difficult, let's call them mind states.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks,
thank you
Kate.
very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate your reflections, and sorry to hear about the loss in your community. I mean, it's one of the things about our recovery world that we're very in touch with the frailty of life and the true suffering. You know, I think sometimes in many circles, including spiritual circles and non-spiritual circles, you know, all this kind of gets, it doesn't come front and center like it does for us when we all know that we have a condition that could kill us, like today. Like if I took a drink and got in my car, you know, it could be all over. And yeah, you point to something really interesting, which is, you know, that typically, even in mindfulness practice, and certainly in psychotherapeutic practice, it can be considered important to name what you're feeling. And that makes sense in a way, right? Like on a certain level, it's like, oh, you know, be aware of what you're feeling and give it a name so you know what's going on. And it's kind of like there's a process in which, okay, do that, and then stop naming it or let go of the name. And because at a certain point, yeah, the naming then solidifies it rather than freeing you from it. Like, so I guess we can think of this as a process, as an awareness process that begins by trying to know what's going on and then sort of trying to not know what it is, you know, if that makes, you know, sort of odd way of phrasing it. But yeah, so thank you. Really appreciate it. I saw, David, you have your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of answered a lot of it in that last statement you made, because right now I'm new. I'm on my second step in my 12-step program.
Okay.
I attend Recovery Dharma meetings, and I appreciate everything you're doing here. And then, so yeah, I'm learning to be able to notice what it is that's troubling me, kind of have a name for it, so that way when I call my sponsor or somebody else to talk to them about it,
Right.
you know, I at least know what I'm talking about to some degree at least. So, but I appreciate what you just said, that this is a process. And so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I am glad that came up, because that's exactly right. I mean, when we're new to sort of feeling, you know, and being aware of our feelings, it's important that we have some way of characterizing them, because when we're in active addiction, it's like we don't even look at them. It's just this suppressive process, and it's confusing, because I mean, certainly when you're intoxicated, your feelings aren't really, you know, they don't make much sense, and when you're not, it's more about avoiding them. So naming them initially and then letting go is probably a good way to think of it. And welcome, and I'm glad you're working your steps and that you're here. So good job showing up. This is you know, I think a pretty safe place for people. I like to think it is. Any other thoughts or questions this morning? Anybody wanted to chime in? Vicky, hello.
Hello. So I have yeah, okay, interesting. So there's the noting practice.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the inventory process.
Yeah.
Right, which is like writing down stuff.
Yeah.
Using language,
Yeah.
right, to try to capture these neural pathway energies that are coming and going and impermanent and, not self. It's like the energies you were talking about. It's so funny to try to think through, how languaging is a part of recognition and acceptance, right? But also that this is not, it's nothing we can hang on to,
Yeah.
there's nothing there. So it's an interesting kind of little paradoxical thing. What can you say about that?
It is. I mean, I think the practical response is use the tool that's helpful for you. And so if you find that naming is really helping you to kind of get some space and not take it personally, great. But if naming is also becoming like some years ago, actually in couples therapy, a therapist suggested that I have a mood disorder, and of course I was pissed off at her right away. Like, fuck, don't tell me and I really don't like diagnoses. I mean, diagnoses again are like this way of reifying things that are dynamic and that, the whole DSM and all that, trying to, it has a practical purpose, but also it becomes this sort of quicksand for our minds. And yet, like yesterday, when I have these mood states that are really unpleasant, sometimes, I'm kind of like have this thought on the edge, like, okay, mood disorder, like I just let it drop in there as a way of saying like, well, this is just a mood that's like, it is a condition. It's not a healthy condition. It's not good. It's unpleasant. And it's kind of funky. And so calling it a disorder sort of makes sense. I get it. So I kind of let it pass through, but then it's like, let me not focus on that because that's a depressing thing to think about. So that's the tricky thing, right? It's like, oh, it's helpful, but then it's like, oh yeah, I've got this disorder. Because it's really, to me, much more like I have the flu, and you get sick and you feel like crap. But if I get sick and I feel like crap, I'm not going, what is wrong with me for having a cold? Why do I have a flu? Why am I such a failure at life? Or why am I such an afflicted person who gets a cold? It's like, no, just, you get colds. It's just, everybody gets colds, everybody gets moods.
Mm-hmm.
Some people get really bad colds or they get allergies, I mean, maybe allergies are even a better idea, because allergies are things that are persistent, right? Through your life. You keep having but you don't think, get depressed about having an allergy. You get maybe frustrated with it, but you're not sort of blaming yourself, like, what's wrong with me? Other people don't have allergies, it's like, I have bad moods. Other people don't have bad moods. Well, of course they do, and it's, there's not something wrong with me. It's, sharing about it is one of the things that's so important to me, because I know I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who has mood allergies, maybe that's what I'll call it from now on. I have a mood allergy. I'm allergic to being human.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. From the sunny Truth or Consequences.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sun is good, right?
Yeah, it looks like. All right, folksies. So nice to see everybody. Sarah, I'm so proud of you for hanging in though for the whole class. Looks like the baby is waking up. You're trying to calm the baby. Very good. Beautiful. So metta for the baby and for you and for all mothers And yeah, so I'll try to get back to my habit of leaving people with an idea to carry with you. And so just maybe this week, work with naming and not naming what you're feeling. Go try both, and try giving it a name and then letting it go, and just tuning into what is it, what is the feeling, rather than sense it rather than name it. So that can be your practice this week and for the rest of your life. So, all right, you guys, great to see you. I will be back on Friday night.
Thank you,
To see you
Kevin.
then. Okay.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Kevin. Take care of yourself.
All
okay?
right, Bill.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Kevin, and happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, thank you,
Thank
Alan.
you.
Yes, I'll be celebrating all day long.
I know you will.
Yes, for sure. I have to go out and buy some candy right now, so,
Yeah.
and maybe some
Bye-bye.
cards to take to class. Bye.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care.
Take care.
See you. Bye.